Discover the amazing Revenger grandma who transformed her life after 30 years of injustice. Georgia Weaver stood on the precipice of change, staring longingly at her grandmother's hidden treasures in the attic. It was a moment steeped in nostalgia, yet it felt like a wake-up call. For 30 years, she had dedicated herself to her family, pouring love into raising her children and later nurturing her grandchildren. Yet, the sting of loss weighed heavily on her heart. Mike, her beloved husband, gone too soon, leaving behind not just memories but an unresolved ache, a bitterness that roiled within her like an angry storm. The accident that claimed his life was preventable, a result of corporate negligence, and Georgia could feel that injustice chasing her. Dreams long buried under layers of caregiving now threatened to suffocate her. As she sat amidst the dust and faded photographs, Georgia felt invisible, a mere bystander in the life she once loved. Was she to remain a ghost of the vibrant woman she had once been? As thoughts collided in her mind, a flicker of hope ignited the paintings. The beautiful strokes her grandmother had created, each one a testament to joy. If only she could wield a brush again, perhaps she could channel the whirlwind of emotions into something beautiful and powerful. Determined to reclaim her voice, Georgia enrolled in art classes at the local community college, emboldened by the support of her children. Yet with each step forward, her heart sank under a blanket of doubt. Would the younger students scoff at her attempts, viewing her a 68-year-old grandmother as an amusing curiosity instead of a serious artist? The whispers of skepticism seemed to echo in her ears. But if she could transform her grief into art, could she also confront the forces that let her down? Would she have the courage to call out the very negligence that robbed her of the future she dreamed of? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The tension built as Georgia pored over canvas after canvas, each brush stroke a delicate balance of beauty and anguish. She immersed herself, hoping to spill her pain into her work. As her compositions grew darker, richer, they honed into a message not just of personal sorrow but of universal negligence. Her series, titled Voices of the Forgotten, transformed into a haunting exposé of a system that had failed her. She could feel her determination solidifying, but with it came the fear that swirled in her stomach like lead. What would happen when she stood before the townspeople, her truth laid bare? And then, the night of the exhibition arrived. Surrounded by vibrant colors and emotions, she felt both exhilarated and terrified. Amidst friends and family, her gaze drifted, spotting the corporate representative lurking in the shadows. Nothing could have prepared her for this moment. Heart racing, muscles tensed, would she have the power to confront him? Would she collapse under the weight of her anguish, or would she channel everything into the art? With every heartbeat, a flurry of doubts assailed her mind. The room thickened with tension, leaving Georgia grappling with her next move. Would she seize this moment to reclaim her power, or would her voice forever remain silenced? The air hung heavy, charged with potential upheaval, leaving the audience breathless. Georgia's heart thundered in her chest as she stood on the edge of a decision that felt monumental. The vibrant colors of her artwork surrounded her, swirling with the voices of her emotions. They called to her more fervently than ever, echoing the pain and loss she had endured, but also the resolve that surged in her veins. Her hands clenched at her sides, fingers trembling with both fear and anticipation, facing the corporate representative, a man whose indifference had shattered her world, brought forth a tumult of emotions. Anger flickered in her chest, an incandescent flame sparked by years of resignation. How had she allowed herself to remain silent for so long? But as the onlookers appreciated her art, she struggled between pride and fear of exposure. What if they only saw an elderly woman daring to put paint on a canvas? Would they laugh? She caught a glimpse of her family in the crowd, her children, proud and supportive, eyes gleaming with encouragement. Their faith in her seemed to amplify her own courage, surging through every fiber of her being. In that moment, doubt transformed into defiance. "Tonight, I do not hide," she murmured to herself, steeling her resolve. With newfound clarity, she crossed the room, each step echoing a silent promise to herself. She would confront the demons that had haunted her for too long. "Mr. Ashford," Georgia said, her voice steady, cutting through the murmur of conversations like a knife. The representative turned slowly, his initial surprise morphing into a mask of calculated indifference. She felt the weight of the entire room's gaze shift towards them, anticipation palpable like the crackling static in the air before a storm. "I need you to understand something," she continued, emboldened by the collective support. "Your cooperation destroyed my life. Your negligence took my husband away." The words flowed from her, a torrent of bottled emotions. "You choose profit over people, and I'm here to hold you accountable." Shock flickered across his expression, quickly masked by his practiced facade. But Georgia had seen it, the brief glimpse of vulnerability, a crack in his polished armor. For the first time in decades, she felt like the architect of her own narrative. As the audience remained silent, absorbing her intensity, she took a step closer, her presence amplifying. "Art is my weapon. Each brushstroke in this exhibition represents not just my pain, but the silenced voices of many. You cannot ignore us any longer." Her heart raced as she unleashed the fullness of her feelings, blurring the line between vulnerability and strength. Georgia's words became a rallying cry, not just for herself but for everyone who had been wronged. The courage that once felt insurmountable now washed over her in waves, but that shared moment of undeniable strength also revealed a deeper turbulence within her. Would she be able to maintain this newfound power? The fear of repercussions lingered in the corners of her mind. Might she be retaliated against, or viewed as a nuisance? As she stood in the charged atmosphere of the exhibition, questions of consequence and backlash folded into her resolve. With every breath, she prepared to navigate this precarious new terrain, the very essence of her spirit aflame with determination. But the night was far from over. Georgia sensed the ripple effect of her confrontation, the whispers that would undoubtedly follow. She understood that this was merely a beginning, a prelude to the storm of challenges awaiting her. In the depth of her resolve, she contemplated the imminent battles ahead, for Georgia Weaver was not simply reclaiming her voice, she was igniting a fire. What would it demand of her? And with her choices now clear, the greatest test loomed just on the horizon. How far would she be willing to go to ensure that no one else would suffer like she had? The answers awaited her in the shadows, teasing the potential for either liberation or a depth of despair she had never imagined. In the days following the exhibition, Georgia felt an upsurge of energy mingled with a lingering edge of fear. The adrenaline from her confrontation with Mr. Ashford fueled her determination, yet she found herself wrestling with the aftermath of her bold declaration. The enthusiasm of the gallery had buoyed her confidence, but as reality set in, doubt began to fray the edges of her resolve. She felt exposed, like a canvas stripped of its paint, unsure how to fill herself back in. She spent the next week in her studio, surrounded by the chaotic beauty of her unfinished pieces. Each brushstroke was an exploration, a deliberation of colors and emotions, a labyrinth in which she sought both clarity and catharsis. Art had always been her sanctuary, but now it served another purpose. It was a bridge to her new identity. Each work reflected her journey from grief to defiance, transforming her pain into a tangible form. Yet, the risk of painting herself into a corner, a place where she could no longer speak out, loomed over her. Late one evening, after the sun's last rays illuminated the canvases, Georgia set down her brush and stared into the vibrant hues before her. What if her fight against corporate indifference was just beginning? The thought filled her with a surge of warmth but also an icy flicker of apprehension. She needed to prepare for the pushback that would inevitably come with her newfound voice. Determined to consolidate her resolve, she retreated into research, delving into the histories of others who had risen above injustice. She found inspiration in stories of activists and artists who transformed their trauma into change, unearthing the power of personal narrative as a catalyst for revolution. Each tale reminded her that her voice held weight, that speaking her truth had the power to provoke thought and elicit change. Simultaneously, connections began to form. The art community in her town had rallied around her. Conversations turned into collaborations, and they were eager to amplify her story. At a local gallery meeting, Georgia found herself speaking with an enthusiastic group of artists. They shared experiences of battling apathy in their crafts and discussed plans for future exhibits highlighting social issues. One night, she introduced an idea that had been blooming in her mind. What if we create an exhibition centered on accountability toward those who have wronged us, those who profit from our loss? She watched as their eyes sparkled with intrigue, the gears turning in their minds. It was thrilling to witness the resonance of her vision, but with every partnership came a new layer of scrutiny. Georgia knew that her attempts to challenge a powerful corporation would not go unnoticed. The shadows of retaliation loomed large over her consciousness. Would Ashford retaliate, and how? The stakes grew with each conversation, escalating her fear to a constant companion. However, confronting her fears took a new shape as she penned letters to her local media, detailing her story and the hope for change through art. In these private moments, she discovered a hidden talent for written expression, an ability to articulate her emotions in ways that transcended spoken words. No longer did she just create art, she began crafting a narrative that could invite others into her journey. Each word became a brushstroke, painting a vivid picture of her struggle. It was a liberating revelation, the realization that she could express herself in multiple forms, asserting her identity through writing just as powerfully as through her artwork. Yet, woven into her newfound abilities was a haunting question: what if her voice, amplified through media and art, only drew further ire from those she challenged? This conflict divided her heart. The urge to speak out battled against the instincts bred from years of silence. As she prepared to release her story, a ringing in her phone pulled her away from the reverie of her thoughts. She paused, glancing at the screen. It displayed an unfamiliar number. Her breath caught. Momentarily, a jolt of adrenaline coursing through her. In that moment, Georgia understood she was standing on the precipice of change. The urgency of her message now pushed her toward an inevitable confrontation. What would she say? Would this call be a warning, a threat, or perhaps an opportunity? The moment had come to confront the repercussions of her voice. Choices loomed before her, each fraught with anxiety. The gravity of her quest solidified in her heart. Whatever awaited her on the other end of that call could change everything. Georgia steadied her breath, allowing a moment of silence to envelop her as the unfamiliar number pulsed brightly on the screen. The urgency coursing through her did not stem from fear alone, it was also tinged with a burgeoning curiosity. Against the backdrop of the unknown, she recognized that she stood on the cusp of transformation, her own and potentially others as well. Was this the incitement of her next chapter? She accepted the call. Clearing her throat, she pressed the phone to her ear. Hello. Her voice sounded steady, belying the tempest within. Is this Georgia Millington? The voice was smooth, characterized by a clipped precision that suggested authority. Georgia's heart raced yet again, but something held weight on the other end of the line. Yes, it is. Mr. Ashford has requested a meeting with you. He insists on discussing the direction of your recent projects. The statement hung in the air, thick with implications. A meeting with Ashford. Would this be a confrontation, or a potential opportunity for negotiation? Did he intend to squash her initiative outright, or could he see value in her work? The dichotomy filled her with an uneasy thrill. When? She asked, determined to maintain her composure. Tomorrow at 10 a.m. at the office. The line disconnected before Georgia could respond. She was left clutching the phone, a mix of exhilaration and trepidation flooding her senses. The encounter loomed like a dark cloud filled with uncertainty, but she sensed an opening, a chance to articulate her vision directly to the man whose cooperation had felt omnipotent until now. The hours leading up to the meeting passed swiftly, filled with a volatile blend of preparation and apprehension. In the studio, Georgia surrounded herself with her most furious canvases, the ones that echo her rebellion, desperately channeling emotion into her brushwork, each stroke a fierce testament to her growth. She thought about how her art had afforded her the language to challenge not just Ashford but the very systems that sought to silence her. As night deepened, she turned to her laptop, fingers flying across the keyboard. An email to her closest collaborators crystallized her resolve. I will meet with Ashford tomorrow and express my vision for our exhibition. Please hold the fort while I delve into this conversation. I'll need your strength and creativity regardless of the outcome. At dawn, she awakened to find her reflection staring back at her, a blend of the artist she had always been and the advocate she now aspired to be. In the mirror, she recognized the resolve in her posture, the fire in her eyes. This was a pivotal moment, a chance to reclaim her narrative not only as an artist but as a woman refusing to be swept aside. Minutes before 10, she arrived at the imposing glass facade of Ashford's office. The vastness of the lobby mirrored the scope of her unease, yet she drew strength from it. The vibrating tension that had once immobilized her now buzzed with purpose. As she stepped into the elevator, preparing to address the man whose power had historically dwarfed her aspirations, the weight of her decision settled like armor over her shoulders. She was no longer a passive player in a world of indifference. She had carved a path towards justice that was uniquely hers. When the elevator doors slid open to reveal Ashford standing handsomely in suit and tie, a small knot of uncertainty coiled in her stomach. It was here she could either cower or confront, embodying everything she stood to represent. At this moment, Georgia realized that her story was not simply about resilience but also about unyielding tenacity. She stepped forward, heart pounding but spirit unyielding, ready to state her vision and entrench her position. Will Ashford welcome her words or will he retaliate? The tension of the unknown tightened around her, ready to unveil what awaited in the exchange and how her courage would shape the outcome of her fight for accountability. The room was crisp with a polished efficiency that reflected Ashford's corporate persona. Georgia took a steadying breath as she crossed the threshold, mentally preparing herself for the confrontation. The vast office felt like a cold battleground, each piece of modern furniture gleaming under the fluorescent lights, serving as a reminder of the world she aspired to change yet was often dwarfed by. Ashford looked up from his desk, his expression unreadable. He gestured to a chair across from him. "Miss Millington," he began, his voice as smooth as the tailored fabric of his suit. "I appreciate you coming in." "Thank you for having me," she replied, her own voice steady despite the tumultuous storm brewing inside her. She noticed a hint of surprise in his eyes, perhaps at the absence of the awe he usually inspired in his subordinates. "Let us get straight to the point. Your recent art pieces have sparked interest, but there are concerns about your direction," Ashford stated, leaning back in his chair, fingers steepled. "Some believe your work is too experimental, too incendiary for our audience." Georgia felt a flicker of being cornered but quickly quelled it. This was not the time to retreat. She squared her shoulders. "Art is meant to challenge, Mr. Ashford. It's a reflection of our times, even discomforting ones. I believe that we can engage our audience by provoking thought rather than pandering to them." He raised an eyebrow, appreciating the fierceness in her tone. "And how do you propose we market this to stakeholders looking for assurance rather than alarm?" In that moment, it struck her, this was not just a sales pitch. She was advocating for a vision, her vision. "I propose a dual exhibition. We can juxtapose my more avant-garde pieces with those that resonate with traditional sensibilities. It can highlight the evolution of perception in art, bridging gaps while hosting dialogue rather than catering solely to established expectations. Ashford's face remained inscrutable, and doubt crept into her mind. Did he see value in her proposal, or was she merely igniting a fire that would lead to her downfall? Interesting, he murmured, taking a pen and tapping it rhythmically against the desk. But your vision requires investment resources. You'd be asking us to take a risk. Every innovation requires risk, she shot back, the words bursting forth with an intensity she hadn't anticipated. Isn't that what you thrive on, shaping markets, directing trends? If you continue to play it safe, you'll miss the opportunity to redefine what art can mean in society, to establish your brand as a leader rather than a follower. He paused, the pen halting mid-tap, and leaned forward slightly, intrigued. So, you think you can persuade the board to take this leap? The question hung, demanding an answer. Georgia faced the possible ramifications of her choice. If she pushed too hard, she could fracture her tenuous hold on the project. If she yielded too easily, she wouldn't be the leader she aspired to be. Not only can I persuade them, I will show them why it's necessary, she declared, confidence swelling in her chest. Ashford watched her with narrowed eyes, measuring her resolve. Then you have a tougher battle ahead than you might think. I'll support you on one condition: you lead it entirely. If it fails, you'll bear the fallout. The challenge ignited a fire within Georgia. I'll accept those terms, Mr. Ashford, she stated firmly, every ounce of fear transmuted into exhilaration. She had willingly ventured into a realm of accountability, knowing her commitment would not only test her abilities but redefine her identity as an artist. As she stood to leave, Ashford's voice stopped her. Just remember, Georgia, this is no ordinary assignment. The stakes are high, and you may not like who you meet within them. The door clicked shut behind her, and a rush of emotions surged through her, exhilaration mingling with uncertainty. Would she manage to carve a niche for her vision or be swallowed by the very system she sought to challenge? One thought hung suspended: how far was she willing to go to ensure her voice was not only heard, but echoed? In that questioning glimmer, a new resolve took root. She had embarked on a path rife with potential consequence but basked in the thrill of navigating it. The fight had only just begun. As she exited the building, a calculated plan formed in her mind, the stakes elevating with each step she took towards the unknown. Could her artwork truly spark the change she envisioned, or had she just opened a door she wasn't ready to face? Georgia awoke the next morning with the remnants of her meeting still swirling in her mind. The air smelled of rain, promising a day that might mirror her own emotional tempest. She allowed herself a moment to embrace the thrill and the anxiety before she reluctantly transitioned to her day's agenda. With a long to-do list stretching in front of her, however, nothing felt as pressing as the constants echoing in her mind: conviction and consequence. First on her list was to distill her proposal into a comprehensive presentation for the board. She maneuvered through coffee shops and libraries, gathering thoughts like a painter collecting colors on her palette. Each refined articulation of her vision felt more definitive, less like a fraying wish and more a living idea that could blossom. Yet, with each keystroke and each page crammed with sketches and notes, she discovered something unsettling. What if the very art she sought to uphold, the voice she wished to fortify, might instead isolate her? She pulled in a breath, pondering whether her bold ideas would resonate or simply repel. The thought ignited doubt: was her commitment unduly self-serving? As the day rolled on, she found a moment of solace at her easel, paintbrush resting lightly in her fingers. The canvas stared back at her, a blank expanse that mirrored the uncertainties swirling within. Hesitation crept in. These new works she planned were uncharted territory, deeply personal expressions entwined with her core beliefs. She dipped the brush into a vibrant blue, reflecting the azure of her ambition. But hesitation lingered still, nudging her to question if she had the grit to confront potential backlash. She reached for her phone, scrolling through contacts until she landed on her mentor, Clara. A bastion of wisdom and fierce determination, Clara had faced a series of struggles herself and emerged an indomitable force. What do you do when your vision feels lost in the fog of doubt? Georgia's voice wavered. She needed clarity. Clara listened patiently, a steady hand guiding her through the conversation. Doubt is the fertile ground where ideas grow, Georgia. It's not your enemy, it reflects the weight of what you hold dear. But remember, your willingness to confront the fear is what makes you an artist, not the absence of it. Her mentor's words ignited a flicker of renewed resolve. As she hung up the call, she faced the canvas anew, recognizing that confronting doubt was not a weakness but a powerful companion in her journey. Perhaps it was time to embrace the discomfort that came with innovation rather than shy away from it. The days passed quickly as Georgia galvanized her efforts. She spent hours refining her presentation, juxtaposing her established works next to raw pieces meant to stir conversation rather than placate. Each new piece reflected not just her artistic prowess but rippled with vulnerability, an honest representation of conflict and growth. With her exhibition proposal finally taking shape, she felt a swell of accomplishment. It was more than a mere presentation, it was an assertion of her identity. She had breached her doubt with courage, transforming what once threatened to undermine her into a robust foundation for success. Yet, as she prepared, another concern loomed at the edges of her thoughts. Ashford's warning echoed ominously. Confronting unknown stakeholders was undeniably daunting, and she would not be presented with a warm welcome. The reality of stepping into the boardroom felt increasingly overwhelming. Georgia steeled herself for this next phase. In the silence of her studio, she closed her eyes and imagined walking into that boardroom not as an unsure artist but as a seasoned leader, armed with a message that demanded recognition. She could feel the electric charge of anticipation thrumming through her body, but with it, a sense of foreboding. Would she prove herself to Ashford and the board, or would they dismiss her ideas, forcing her back into the shadows she had fought to escape? The moment was approaching where she would have to confront not only the board members but the preconceived notions they held about her and her art. How would she handle the unyielding scrutiny? And then, amid her swirling thoughts, a question crystallized clearly in her mind: who was she willing to become to advocate for her vision? With the stakes rising and her resolve hardening, she felt the profound implications of this juncture stretching before her, both thrilling and terrifying. Georgia understood now that in order to be heard, she would have to be ready for anything. As she stepped into her preparations, a genuine reckoning lay ahead, one that would test her in ways she could scarcely yet comprehend. The day of the presentation finally approached, and with it, the undeniable truth loomed just beyond her grasp. The time had come to face not just the board, but the very doubts that had haunted her and ignite her true potential. The morning light filtered through the studio windows, casting golden patterns on the chaotic remnants of Georgia's preparations. As she stood poised before her easel once more, the canvas felt both familiar and foreign. Each brushstroke, each drop of paint was an extension of her being, her fear, her ambition, her relentless pursuit of authenticity. Yet today, the pressure mounted, the board meeting loomed, and with it the prospect of rejection and potential triumph. Georgia took a deep breath, attempting to ground herself. She closed her eyes, recalling Clara's words. Doubt was vital. Acceptance of it was her first step toward embracing the higher stakes of her career. Transmitting her vision to the board required more than a detailed presentation, it demanded she convey her essence without apology. How could she ensure that what fueled her passion translated to resonance with those who might not share her vision? Determined to solve that puzzle, she shifted her focus back to her proposal. It was not merely about the pieces hanging on the walls but about the dialogue they would ignite. Each artwork was a bridge connecting her personal journey with broader societal conversations. Still, the nagging familiar sense of vulnerability tugged at her, reminding her of past experiences where her voice had been stifled. She needed strategy over sentiment. She needed to cultivate conviction. Laid out across her desk were not just sketches, but her hopes and fears distilled into the language of art. Transgressing the boundaries of expected artistic expression was not a guarantee of acceptance. There lay the risk of being misunderstood, criticized, rendered invisible once again. Rehearsing her presentation, she practiced speaking deliberately, emphasizing clarity and emotion in equal measure as if preparing for a performance. She mentally positioned herself not as an artist but a messenger bringing forth ideas worth exploring. The rumbles of approaching thunderstorms mirrored her internal turmoil as she practiced her narrative. Her voice grew firmer with each repetition, buoyed by the conviction of her intent. If she sought honor as an artist, she had to learn to embrace rejection as part of the journey. It wasn't simply the content, she realized, but also the connection that would matter most. Moments before leaving, a sudden thought struck her like a bolt of lightning. What if she used anticipated critiques to prepare her arguments? Each potential dismissal could become a stepping stone, fortifying her resolve. With her sketches meticulously chosen, she drafted responses for every potential challenge. The board's skepticism would not drown her vision, she would swim through it, equipped with clarity and strategic counterarguments. A nervous flutter pulsed in her stomach as she arrived at the venue. The atmosphere felt tense, thick with expectation. For the first time, she felt the power of her story aligned with the urgency of the moment. This was not just about art, it was about instigating a shift in perspective, all encapsulated in her creative endeavors. As she approached the doors to the boardroom, doubt swirled again, threatening to ensnare her. She thought about Clara, her mentor's unwavering belief in her potential ringing in her ears. Georgia had dedicated herself to this path. Now was the moment to enact every lesson learned, every challenge faced, and every piece created. Taking a deep breath, Georgia pushed through the doors, revealing a sea of attentive faces awaiting her words. The board members, each with their own assumptions and experiences, now looked to her to redefine what art could signify. And just as she was about to announce her opening line, another thought surged forward. Would they see her vision as she did? Would her conviction be enough to rupture their preconceived notions? As the silence settled, Georgia realized she was about to confront not just the board, but a fundamental question of identity and worth. The stakes had never felt higher. Balancing on the edge of fear and exhilaration, she prepared to deliver not merely a presentation, but a clarion call to recognition. The room felt electric as Georgia took center stage, her heart thumping in rhythm with the sudden weight of her ambitions. She scanned the room, taking in the expectant expressions, the varied faces leading to both familiar and unknown reactions. This was not merely a presentation, it was her manifesto, a daring declaration of who she was and what her art represented. Thank you for being here today, she began, her voice steady, resonating with the belief she had cultivated amidst the storm of anticipation. I have waited for this moment, where I get to share not just my work but the narrative behind it. Each word flowed from her, fueled by deep-seated passions, as she positioned herself to share the core of her artistic identity. As she unfolded the layers of her proposal, a narrative thread emerged, a tapestry of her history interwoven with broader themes of resilience, belonging, and transformation. She spoke of her childhood, moments that had etched both joy and sorrow into her being, spurring her to create art that challenged and inspired. The board members leaned in, anchored by her fiery conviction. She had them hooked, and the realization ignited a spark of confidence within her. But as she navigated her presentation, doubts resurfaced. Would they truly understand the weight of her stories? Would they uncover the nuances of her message? She recalled the challenges she'd faced in her career, the hurdles that had threatened to break her spirit. She pressed on, employing her rehearsed strategies to address anticipated critiques before they could form, responding with a calmness that belied the inferno of anxiety underneath. Art, she asserted, is not consumed in isolation. It exists in dialogue with our time, reflecting our shared humanity. With each statement, she transformed abstract criticism into tangible insights, challenging their expectations head-on. It felt like a dance. She was guiding them through her vision, step by careful step, yet a lingering fear remained. What if her portrayal fell flat? Just as she was about to pivot into the emotional core of her concept, a board member interrupted, breaking her rhythm. "Georgia, do you think your art truly speaks to us? External interpretations can sometimes obscure the creator's intent." The tension in the room shifted palpably, as if time had paused to hold its breath. Her heart raced, but a flicker of determination surged forward. This was the moment she anticipated, the confrontation that could redefine her trajectory. "Thank you for your question," she replied, channeling her newfound resolve. "I believe that is the very essence of art. It's an invitation to engage in conversation, to discover meaning beyond our perceptions." She felt adrenaline course through her, propelling her argument further. "If my paintings provoke discomfort or elation, then I have succeeded, as it invites discourse. I assent that the purpose of art to stir, provoke, and invite reflection." The board watched, their expressions a mixture of skepticism and admiration. Georgia felt the shift. She had taken control of the narrative. With every word, she dismantled their barriers, painting not just images on canvas but vivid ideas that demanded recognition. As the discussion unfolded, each member began to share their reactions, challenging her yet also revealing glimpses of understanding. Georgia realized that these moments of tension were not adversarial, but essential. She learned to embrace this discomfort. It was a catalyst for growth, a crucible where her artistic identity could be forged with clarity. By the time they approached the conclusion, Georgia felt lighter, emboldened by the experience. Despite the unpredictability of their verdicts, she had stepped into her power, laying bare her vision unwaveringly. As the meeting adjourned, uncertainty loomed thick in the air. Would her efforts resonate, inspiring the board to embrace her work? Georgia stepped back from the table, caught in a whirlwind of emotions that swirled around fortitude and apprehension. She realized she had traversed a pivotal point in her journey. The boardroom might end today, but what lay ahead would test her resolve even further. Perhaps the greater battle was yet to come as she navigated potential rejection, a terrifying prospect cloaked in the guise of an opportunity for resilience. Georgia inhaled deeply, ready to confront whatever awaited her next. What if rejection was merely a pathway to greater discovery, to finding deeper aspects of herself she had yet to unearth? A wave of determination washed over her body. The moment of truth lingered. She felt the ground shifting beneath her feet as she prepared to embrace a new chapter of her artistic journey. Driven forward by curiosity and anticipation, she questioned what else she could learn and evolve into. The next step was clear, confronting not just the board's decision, but what it meant for the legacy she aimed to build. Georgia's thoughts raced as she stepped out of the boardroom, the weight of the meeting still pressing heavily on her chest. The polished floors and glass walls of the corporate space suddenly felt confining. Each footstep echoed her uncertainty, a stark contrast to the fervor that had ignited her presentation moments earlier. Yet, amidst doubt and anticipation, there was also a flicker of hope. She had taken risks, challenged paradigms, and laid bare her artistic vision. In the hallway, she leaned against the cool wall, drawing a deep breath to center herself. What would tomorrow bring? She had voiced her passion, but would it resonate? The boards, with their cautious expressions, could still swing either way. Rejection could shred her confidence, pulling her down into a pit of frustration and failure, but perhaps it could also reveal the depth of her resilience. Over the next few days, an internal battle raged within her. She revisited her childhood memories, those formative moments that had driven her to create art. Each stroke of paint, every canvas she had turned into home, resonated as pieces of a puzzle that shaped her identity. Who would she become if her work was deemed unworthy? Could she muster the courage to redefine herself in the shadow of public opinion? Her friends urged her to stay hopeful, to consider how far she had already come. "You can't allow others to define you," her closest friend Naomi often reminded her. Glimmers of wisdom from those around her were grounding, but they couldn't quell the voices of insecurity that reverberated through Georgia's mind. She decided to retreat into her studio, a sanctuary of colors and challenges waiting to be unveiled. Painting had never been merely a hobby, it was her lifeline. As she dipped her brush into vibrant hues, she channeled her anxiety into vivid abstractions, swirling emotions onto the canvas. With each stroke, she confronted her fears, unraveling the internal knots tight around her psychic. Hours passed unnoticed as she immersed herself in her art. However, with every piece she created, a realization dawned upon her: each work was more than a reflection of her technical ability. It articulated her journey, encapsulated her struggles, her victories, and yes, even her rejections. This became her own narrative, uncontested and liberated from external opinions. One stormy evening, as raindrops pelted the windows, she received an unexpected email. The board's decision was in. Her heart raced, a mixture of adrenaline and trepidation coursing through her veins. With shaking fingers, she clicked open the message, the subtle flicker of her computer screen illuminating her face. Georgia's breath hitched. They valued her work, they recognized her vision. Words like unique perspective, poignant, and essential leapt off the screen. But as she read their interest to showcase her pieces in the upcoming exhibition, a gnawing apprehension settled within her. Success could easily sway into pressure. There would be scrutiny, and audience poised to dissect her vulnerability laid bare. The thrill of acceptance battled against the shadows of doubt creeping into her mind. The questions loomed larger now: was she truly prepared to bare her soul to strangers? The thrill of the exhibition also amplified fears of failure. What would happen if the world didn't respond as she hoped? Yet, deep within the chaos of her thoughts, something shifted. The exhibition was not a definitive judgment of her worth. Instead, it was another step on her journey, another opportunity to grow both personally and professionally. The decision lay beyond mere acceptance, it was a decision to push boundaries. With renewed determination, Georgia resolved to confront her anxieties with purpose. She would not merely present her work, she would embrace this chance to explore and expand her creative identity fully. As she prepared for what lay ahead, new questions emerged, casting shadows on her newfound hope. What revelations would arise in the coming days? How would she prepare herself for a potentially judgmental crowd? Georgia inhaled deeply, ready to face not just the exhibition but the numerous facets of herself that would be brought to light as she prepared to step beyond her comfort zone. Would this be the crucible of her growth, pushing her toward new artistic realms? Something profound was about to unfold, and she could hardly wait. Georgia Weaver stood in her studio, surrounded by the vibrant canvases that represented not just her artistry but her journey, her transformation from a grieving widow bound by sadness to a fierce advocate wielding her creativity as a tool for change. There was no mistaking the gravity of her upcoming exhibition. This was more than an artistic showcase, it was a culmination of her pain, resilience, and unyielding commitment to speak truth to power. In the weeks leading to the exhibition, she had meticulously planned each detail, balancing her vision with the voice of experience she had gained in confronting the corporate Goliath that had once suffocated her aspirations. Each brushstroke she applied pushed her boundaries. She poured her heart into pieces that reflected not only her personal story but also the collective experience of anyone silenced by indifference. The exhibition was titled Voices of the Forgotten, and within its walls, she would arise as both artist and activist. The opening night arrived with an energy that made the air crackle with apprehension. As she arrived at the gallery, filled with familiar faces now colored with anticipation and support, Georgia couldn't help but reflect on the stark contrast from who she had once been. In that moment, she was not the quiet grandmother who had spent her days in the shadows, she was a woman unafraid to claim her space, her narrative, her truth. The exhibition hall pulsed with life, her paintings coming to life under the warm lighting, each piece a challenge to the status quo. Guests mingled, their conversations punctuated by the emotional resonance of her work. As people paused to gaze upon her creations, their eyes drew lines of connection to the narratives she had depicted. Curiously, Georgia observed how her former doubts transformed into admiration where once she feared judgment, she now witnessed respect. Then came the moment she had prepared for. Georgia stepped forward to address the crowd. Her heart raced, but she found solace in her surroundings. This was her element, her command. "Thank you all for being here tonight," she began, her voice steady, unwavering. "Art is a vessel of dialogue, a reflection of our triumphs and our struggles. Tonight, I choose to elevate the voices that too often go unheard." With each word, she could feel the energy of the room shift. Curiosity transformed into engagement. She articulated not just what her paintings represented, but the passion driving her to confront the forces that caused her grief. As the words spilled forth, Georgia saw faces ignite upon recognition. She had always feared that her age or experience might render her invisible among the younger artists, yet strangely, her life had endowed her with an authenticity that captivated the audience. Her courage galvanized attendees. They were drawn not only to her talent but her fierce dedication to accountability for injustices endured. In that instant, she felt a profound sense of belonging. Then, amidst her speech, the door swung open. All eyes turned to see Mr. Ashford, the very embodiment of the corporate negligence she had opposed, stepping hesitantly into the gallery. The reality of their prior confrontation pulsed in her memory. Would he challenge her again? She took a breath, steeling herself for what could be a moment of tension. But as he approached, she was surprised to see a carefully curated expression crossing his face, a semblance of respect blended with unease. "Ms. Weaver," he began, his tone cautious, respectful. "You've managed to capture something visceral in your work." The audience quietly halted, caught between fascination and disbelief. He continued, "I admit, your work has forced my company to reevaluate its stance. I'm here to discuss working together toward a safer future for our community." Georgia felt a rush of validation as an electric pulse surged in the room, an affirmation of her journey. Her fight had earned recognition in the very heart of the corporation that had once sought to silence her. As the crowd erupted into whispers of astonishment and admiration, Georgia's heart swelled. This was not just a conversation, this was reconciliation, an avenue for change forged through the raw honesty of her art. After her opening remarks, guests meandered through her works, engaging in profound dialogue about art's power to influence social change. Overhead, Georgia spotted her family, their smiles shining with pride. She felt rooted in her transformation, every previous doubt now replaced with solid confidence and purposeful resolve. As the night drew to a close and guests began to depart, Georgia realized something transformative had taken place. She was no longer just an artist grappling with loss, she had become a recognized advocate for change. The exhibition not only elevated her work but also solidified her voice, positioning her amidst the community she had once felt estranged from. In the weeks that followed, media outlets highlighted her evolution, showcasing her project's resonance with systemic change. Georgia had achieved acknowledgement not merely as an artist, but as a person who dared to redefine her narrative and those of many others. The accolades flowed in, yet she remained introspective, grateful for every brushstroke of her hard-earned journey. Weeks later, standing in her studio, Georgia smiled at the walls lined with newly completed works, each piece now a testament to her journey. Overcoming the silence of grief and reclamation, painted with vibrancy, they symbolized a newfound legacy she would continue to forge. Art, she mused to herself, is not merely about creation, it's about transformation. With that, she set to work on a new canvas, one that would evoke every lesson learned, every battle fought, and the incredible journey ahead. This was it. Georgia had not only conquered her fears, she had crafted a powerful narrative that resonated both personally and professionally. The journey, once rooted in sorrow, now burst forth in brilliance, a celebration of resilience and artistry intertwined. Now it's your time to step up. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories that will inspire your own journey. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and ensure these stories continue reaching those who need them. Comment below with your reactions and theories about Georgia's next chapter. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this powerful conclusion. You need to show your support. This is the moment to engage. Don't wait even one more second to share.